Creating the blade in the last video, we're going to go ahead and create the attachments for the blade, the mounting points. Now there's two major components to that. There's the two beams at the bottom, and there's the big pneumatic pistons that move the blade up and down. There's one part here which I'm starting off with straight away because I can reuse that in a large part, is the large connecting piece for the main mounting beams for the front blade. I need to do a few adjustments, scale it out a bit, but for the majority I can just reuse this mesh. So if you ever get the opportunity to do something like this, just go ahead and make use of it. I think I need to scale this down a little bit so that it fits better. And then the base here is slightly different, so I'm going in and modeling that out a bit. Then next up is the actual these large beams themselves. I'm just starting out with a box there. Use the align tool to get that box aligned correctly. Getting the major shape in there. Then doing an extrude so we can match up with that single piece down there. And there's this diagonal edge in there, which I would prefer to model in to the low poly, because again, this is a very, very visible area. Next to the main sprocket, this is probably one of the most visible areas of the bulldozer. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of extra effort into creating some geometry for this piece here. So slightly extrude this part. That box at the bottom right there, I'm not going to model that one. That's just a little step too far. But these pieces, it will pay off to actually model them. There we go, torque weld that. Now here, same story as we've done for so many of these rounded sides. Just extrude, scale around a bit, move a little bit. Same thing here, move these out, and then scale them down slightly like that. And adding a final edge in there. Part's not very visible, but again, very important piece, so just going slightly further. A little bit of optimizing at the back of this thing. And I'm going to try and physically connect this up. Makes more sense to do it as one piece. So with that done, I'm going to create this sort of a shield area at the front. Like that. And make sure I get all the curves right. And chamfer this one after I've put in the correct position. For such a sharp edge, I actually need more segments than for the blunter edge. And that looks about right. Now this bottom part, I'm just going to move it down. Now obviously we need to do our step of connecting things up so we avoid end-gons. And then next up are these sort of mounting pieces for the main piston. Now on the other side, this one's slightly different, so we'll see what we do there. Again, matching this silhouette. And you'll notice that at the left, you might have seen already, there's a whole bunch of these small sort of teeth in there. We're obviously not going to model every single one of those. That's something we'll leave up to the normal map. So these are what I'm talking about. This is just going to be kept straight. This piece, however, does need to be extruded. And there we go. That should be about it. We can attach it to the main piece. And then we're just going to grab the high poly parts for the main piston. And we're going to reuse those for creating the low poly. Same deal as we've done many times before. Just optimizing this up. And we need to do a little bit more welding here. Weld those in, that one as well. Then get rid of these edge loops. And we should just get rid of these edge loops as well. Not this one though. This one's quite important, so I'm going to remove those. And we've removed one too much, so I'm going to go back and just undo my actions, then manually weld these in, because you'll never notice that tiny piece there. And the whole non-quad thing is irrelevant here. Now this main piston here, again, I'm reusing this because, as you might remember from the high poly video, doing these pistons that go from perfectly round to a hexagonal, octagonal, or square shape is slightly trickier. So I just reuse these parts so I can keep the proportions. It's a faster thing to do anyway. So I'm removing the really messy areas with all the separate details, like the holes in there. And I'm only keeping this main shape at the back here. Again, this has a lot of sides, so I'm going to try and remove every 1 out of 3 of these. We're going to remove those. I'm not doing that bottom part because I'm just going to delete that and get rid of it later. And then I'm going to select those and delete them. We're just going to work with this thing here to keep the main shapes. I am taking quite a lot away from the high poly, but this part is easy to rebuild. It's mostly about the hexagonal part at the top there, which is what I really want to keep. Again, this part can be slightly optimized. I'm going to remove these and then rotate those into place and weld them. So we get rid of them. And then use the loop tools to change the spacing on these edges again. So that should be almost right. And for the loop tools, I had to detach these because you can't use loop tools on closed loops. So I have to manually connect them up again afterwards. There we are. Okay, so for this front part, this is another terrible cleanup job. It's a very complex piece, but again, I think it's even though it's a lot of work, it's easier to just clean it up than to recreate these things. So after doing that for every single part, which took quite a while, we're skipping that because, you know, it's boring. I'm going to go ahead and recreate the big lug nuts that's at the top here. And just a simple 6-sided cylinder, which we're aligning correctly with that piece. These lug nuts, they're so big, and this area again is very visible, that it's not something that we can do in the normal map. So just to make sure that everything is consistent, I'm deleting the parts that are not needed, and then I'll be doing an array tool using the array here, and the array to just recreate them and weld them together again. So a total of 360 degrees, 6 pieces, and it's going to be over the y-axis. You can never be sure which one it is, depends on how you created it, so just use preview to try and determine. Then attach all of these and weld vertices together, making sure you get the correct truss hole so you don't mess things up really badly. That is proving to be slightly tricky to find the correct value. This looks about right. So after this, we're going to attach these major parts together, and then it's time to connect these two areas up. And bridge can sometimes twist in a strange way, but there's a control for that where you can control how it exactly twists. So if it's messing up, just use that one. Then there's this not very visible area at the back, which we're still going to create since we did the high poly for it. Just going to try and keep it relatively simple. It's quite boxy. And we're doing the same cleanup job here as we've done so many times before. Then this is a little piece on the side where there's this interesting profile where the actual piston meets the mounting point. We're just cleaning this up as we've done before. And this entire loop, we can just completely get rid of it because it's not needed, so control backspace. Keeping it fairly simple. And then this piece here, I'm not reusing the high poly for it, just creating it again from scratch because it will be faster. The high poly was really complex. And this is an area where I modeled the high poly as one piece, but I'm deciding to do the low poly as separate pieces. So the piston and this attachment point will be separate pieces. Why? Well, because I'm just going to spend a lot of polygons on something you'll barely see. It's such a complex connection that I think it's not worth it. It might be slightly more trouble baking, even though for piece this intricate and small, it doesn't matter that much. So there we go, trying to get that to match up. I'm going to slightly optimize it. Really don't need to add too much detail to that. I'm going to round that corner a bit more because the center cylinder, you won't really see that. It's not adding to the silhouette, but this corner, these corners, they will be quite visible. So connecting these up to get rid of our end gons. And that looks about right. So we're going to copy this one over to the other side. You'll notice those red handles as well, they were also created from the high poly. Then doing a slight change over here on this piece, because the one on the left side is a little bit different from the one on the right side. Just grabbing that one, making it slightly different. So just trying to match the silhouette there. Make these things up to avoid end gons. And then again, we've got this complex connecting piece. Just clean it up like the others. Same for this thing here. As you can see, again, we're following the rule of the smaller pieces. These aren't as small as some others, just cleaning those up. So selecting bunches of edge loops, just using Alt-L and then backspace to remove them. That should mostly be it. Trying to increase the length on this one a little bit because when it gets rigged, it might have to extend. So we don't want all these things to come up too short. And you might think like I could scale them afterwards, but yeah, but you can't do that because you will be stretching your UV, so we need to do that in advance. So that piece has also been cleaned up. So we've done pretty much all of the bottom pieces. The next up will be the big pistons that move this thing up and down. So we're starting off with a simple cylinder here. Moving it into place. Increase the height a little bit. Not sure about the segments, but they should be good to go since this part is really not very visible. It really is pretty hidden, so about 8 sides should be okay here. So then I'm going to do an extrude. Move this up and use a make planar to align them to the same plane. And then take those down slightly. Now, of course, we need to optimize a little bit here, so I'm going to target weld those together so that we're saving a few tries there. And we can do the same thing at the top. Just target weld these together since they're not really doing anything all that useful. Then next up, I'm deciding to go for these sort of mounting plates that are almost U-shaped. Trying to keep polygon down by doing some cleanup. Can weld those back there. This thing can be welded as well, and just for cleanliness sakes, I'm going to connect those, and that should be good to go. Put the symmetry back on there. Then up here, this is an interesting one, the lights. I just deleted those 2 lights because there's quite a few of these lights on the bulldozer, and I want to keep the amount of unwrapping down on those, so I'm going to reuse them from other parts. And cleaned up that part and just used some splines, which I adjusted afterwards. Now here are these sort of 2 covers where the hydraulic hoses for the front pistons come out of. These covers are fairly simple. Nothing unusual going on here, except for that curve over there. And I'm gonna move these around a little bit. Once they've been moved around, I'm going to also do an extrude inwards here, well, an inset and then an extrude. Because it's going to be annoying to bake if there's a big hole behind that, and I haven't really created any low poly geometry to account for that. So I'm doing an extrude, move that inwards, and moving those down a little bit as well, and then removing these. Okay, so time for the big shapes here. These are armored covers for the front pistons. They don't have a perfect hexagonal shape, so I have to manually go and tweak this shape a little bit so it matches the actual high poly slightly better. Move that out a little bit also. They also tend to taper ever so slightly towards the end, so I'm going to add an extra loop there and do the tapering here. So just move those down, then extrude this part inwards after an inset. Then we've got this main thing here. We're skipping ahead slightly here. I've just used a simple box mesh, did some extrudes and adjustments to get the general profile right, and then next up is trying to get some of the more complex details in there. So I'm going to do a cut here to be able to create this specific piece. So deleting these and then simply using a bridge and a cap on that one try there. Then I did an inset and an extrude of that piece, and deleted the entire underside. And because it's not symmetrical on this side, I'm going to have to cut quite a few extra pieces in there. So using the cut tool, moving this up, I'm going to have to cut again, be able to move that one vertex down. And that should be about okay. There's still some slight detail up there, so I'm adding an extra vertex to be able to do so. I think we're almost there now. So some optimizing, just welding some verts together. And then adding some extra cuts here, because again, this is a silhouette that's quite visible. So I want to make sure I use the correct amount of segments there and space them correctly. Then we have this sort of slot where this big bracket comes out of. So we're cutting that slot in. Then I'm going to select this polygon and extrude it inwards and just delete that bottom part. So we need to go and add some thickness to this thing as well. We're going to do that after we create this bracket. For this bracket, we can just clean up the high poly, and this is where we're going to add some thickness. So I'm manually shooting those edges in, and then doing some cuts to be able to connect them so I don't have any nasty n-gons. Selecting the double vertices, welding them. Then I'm going to close up the complete inside. You will never be able to see this. No one's ever going to be able to tell that we've simplified this quite a lot. So I'm capping that area using bridge, technique we've done so many times before. So bridge, and bridge over there, and a few more extrudes and bridges here so we can close this up. And you will notice that I've added a few extra edges there so that I'm able to connect it up with that slot. This detail at the top, we've pretty much recreated that from scratch. And I'm going to connect it with the rest of the main part. Why am I going to do that? Well, because it's the same like on the high poly. It's really supposed to be a smooth, perfect transition there because it's one single sheet of metal. So I don't think I can get away with making a separate piece. So I spent a few extra tries to attach those things together. So connect those up. Connect, and then doing connect here, and that should be pretty much it. So then I'm taking these hydraulic hoses and reducing their try count drastically by adjusting the interpolation on them. And take note that I'm turning on real world map size for these things. Real world map size is pretty important once I'm going to start UVing them. I have to clean these up a bit more because you barely see any of it. I don't feel like destroying my lines. So I'm going to go in the edit pulley and adjust that a little bit. Trying to get this curve to look slightly nicer. These parts really aren't very visible, so I'm making a quick job out of them. That's it for this part.